File permissions are an important concept in computer security. We only want to give access to certain files and directories to those who need it. While we think about how we want users to access files and folders, we should also think about how the concept of permissions carries over to other areas of your life. Maybe you've locked down your social media posts to only people you trust, or given a copy of your house key to a relative in case of an emergency. You'll learn more about security principles in the last course of this program. For now, we're going to focus on one small building block, file permissions. In Windows, files and directory permissions are assigned using Access Control Lists, or ACLs. Specifically, we're going to work with Discretionary Access Control Lists, or DACLs. Windows files and folders can also have System Access Control Lists, or SACLs, assigned to them. SACLs are used to tell Windows that it should use an event log to make a note of every time someone accesses a file or folder. This is a more advanced topic which you can read up on in the next supplementary reading. You can think of a DACL as a note about who can use a file and what they're allowed to do with it. Each file or folder will have an owner and one or more DACLs. Let's take a look at an example. In Windows Explorer, I have opened up my home directory. If we right-click on Desktop and select Properties, we can see the Properties dialog for our desktop directory. Then if we go to Security tab, we can see the Permissions window here. The top box contains a list of users and groups, and the bottom box has a list of the permissions that each user or group has been assigned. What do each of these permissions do? It changes a bit depending on whether the permission is assigned to a file or a directory. Don't worry, it'll all make sense soon. Let's do a rundown of these permissions. Read. The read permission lets you see that a file exists and allows you to read its contents. It also lets you read the files and directories in a directory. Read and execute. The read and execute permission lets you read files, and if the file isn't executable, you can run the file. Read and execute includes read, so if you select read and execute, read will automatically be selected. List folder contents. List folder contents is an alias for read and execute on a directory. Checking one will check the other. It means that you can read and execute files in that directory. Write. The write permission lets you make changes to a file. It might be surprising to you, but you can have write access to a file without having read permission to that file. The write permission also lets you create subdirectories and write to files in the directory. Modify. The modify permission is an umbrella permission that includes read, execute, and write. Full control. A user or group with full control can do anything they want to the file. It includes all of the permissions of modify and adds the ability to take ownership of a file and change its ACLs. Now, when we click on my username, we can see the permissions for Cindy, which show that I'm allowed all of these access permissions. If we want to see which ACLs are assigned to a file, we can use a utility designed to view and change ACLs called ACLs, or Improved Change ACLs. Let's take a look at my desktop first. So ACLs, desktop. Well, that looks useful, but what does it mean? I can see the user accounts that have access to my desktop, and I can see that my account is one of them. But what about the rest of this stuff? These letters represent each of the permissions that we talked about before. Let's take a look at the help for ACLs. I bet that'll explain things. So ACLs /?. All right, there's a description of what each one of these letters means. The F shows that I have full control of my desktop folder. ACLs calls this full access, And we saw this in the GUI earlier as full control. These are the same permission. What do these other letters mean? NTFS permissions can be inherited, as we saw from the ACLs help. OI means object inherit, and CI means container inherit. If I create new files or objects inside my desktop folder, they'll inherit this DACL. If I create new directories or containers in my desktop, they'll also inherit this DACL. If you'd like to understand more about ACL inheritance in NTFS, check out the next supplemental reading.